This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman. And you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 387 of the DCAU Review. I'm Liam, and with me, as he always is Cal. Cal, we're back for the first time in a little while to the sunny skies of Metropolis. And not only are we going to talk about the Man of Steel this week, but he's brought a friend with him, and unfortunately a new foe, unfortunately for him.
That's right, Liam. We are visiting the sunny skies of Metropolis. However, it's nighttime for nearly the entirety of this episode, so the sky's not so sunny in this particular episode. But we are reviewing the episode The Demon Reborn, which is one of our world's finest crossover episodes that, of course, as you mentioned, the friend being the Dark Knight, teaming up with the Man of Steel for this episode to take on the demon's head himself, Ra's al Ghul. Ra's al Ghul. Who would ever call him Ra's? I mean, come on now. Ra's al Ghul and Talia and the Society of Shadows, and they all show up here for this episode. So excited to chat with you about this one today.
Absolutely. I think one of our listeners pointed out after the last time we talked about the Ra's debate that Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil, who are the co-creators of the characters, each disagreed with the other on how to pronounce it. So really, it's up to you. I've been calling him Ra's too long to change now. It's just I'm just too set in my ways. But if you wanted to go under the Neil Adams Ra's pronunciation, I understand and go with God and all that. But we'll be calling him Ra's because we can't help it. So
and that's literally what he's called
right.
The entirety of the run of the DCAU.
Right. The character himself pronounces it that way. So
at least in this universe.
Exactly.
Arrowverse be damned, or Nolanverse be damned. He's Ra's in this one.
Absolutely. So we'll have a lot to talk about, as you mentioned, with the world's finest teaming up once again to battle Ra's. But first, before we get to that, we will, of course, have our official IMDb synopsis for this week's episode, The Demon Reborn. And that synopsis, of course, Cal, is brought to us by the best way to support our podcast. And that's at a little link called buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review.
That's right. And before we get into our review of this episode this week, which originally aired here on the Kids WB in the United States on September the 18th, 1999, a little DCAU wiki trivia here. One of the few times that I've actually been interested or thought, hey, that's an interesting tidbit. This episode holds the distinction of being the final new episode that debuted in the 90s for the DC, for Superman, at least. So I guess the rest of the episodes, the final two episodes, Legacy, which come after this one, aired in the year 2000. So all the way in the year 2000. But yes, as you mentioned, Liam, this IMDb synopsis is brought to you by buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review. Liam already said it. It's the best way to support the podcast. If you have a desire to support us beyond just listening to the pod, to go above and beyond and perhaps send us a one-time support, head over to that link, buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review. You can find it in the show notes of this very episode, or you can check out on our social medias. It is in our bio on social medias. Check it out. See what you can do to support the podcast. If you're feeling particularly generous one month and you say, hey, you know what? I like these guys. I'm going to give them some encouragement. I'm going to put $3 in their quote unquote coffee fund, which is really just, we're really raising money now so that Liam can afford to be bullied into buying Mondo figures, especially with the announcement of the Superman the Animated Series. So for this month, until we raise the desired funds, it's going to be the Buy Us a Mondo Figure Fund. So if you want to become a one-time supporter of the podcast and encourage my bullying of Liam into buying this action figure like so many of our listeners enjoy, please become a one-time supporter of the podcast. Or hey, you know what? you want to become a regular supporter of the podcast, you're a regular listener, you want to join in and support the podcast as a regular monthly supporter, we have monthly tiers that you can support the podcast at and receive some really fun perks with them. All of the 3 levels that we have some really fun perks. Of course, our top tier, which is the Super Friend tier, gets you the most perks, including the exclusive perk of being able to ask a question, hear your answer on the air about the episode that we're reviewing that week. Looking forward to that as we get those questions each and every week. So if you want to become a one-time supporter and bully Liam into, buy us a coffee, or you want to become a monthly supporter and force Liam's hand to purchase this Superman the Animated Series figure, please head over to buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review and join in on the bullying today. This is the most the tamest form of bullying that you will ever be a part of. Buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review today. If that's not a sales pitch, I don't know what is.
That is right. So with that out of the way, we will get to the synopsis for The Demon Reborn, written by Rich Fogel, directed by friend of the show Dan Reba, with music by Michael McChristian and animation by Coco and Dong Yang. And that synopsis reads as such. A desperate Ra's al Ghul comes to Metropolis with designs on Superman, and only Batman can help.
Well, I don't know. Only Batman can help. I feel like he just happened to be in the right place at the right time. But
I think the Flash could have helped here, but he didn't
we're
know
splitting
about
hairs. We're splitting hairs, Aquaman probably couldn't have helped.
No, it's a landlocked city. How is he going to get there?
From the Metropolis River, Liam. Come on.
Oh, wait. He could just call on seagulls and they can give him a lift. He can just get 90 seagulls to lift him in the air and fly him over.
That's right. You remember the lore.
That's right. But we will get into our plot synopsis. Not a bad job by IMDb, but we'll do our own crack at it. And as the episode opens, we see Lois Lane and Clark Kent at a museum. They're waiting on a exhibit to arrive. I don't know why they would have a big event if the items hadn't already arrived at the museum, but that's what they're doing. Mm-hmm. Things run a little differently in Metropolis. I guess the train is running late, but yes, we find out it's a Native American tribal arts exhibit, and we see that there is a train bringing these precious artifacts to the museum as Lois kind of puts her foot in her mouth a little bit in front of the curator of that display as she talks about how boring this event is.
The tribal arts exhibit should be right on time.
Even the mayor's here. Hard to believe all this commotion over a bunch of beads and blankets.
The heritage of my people is hardly that trivial, Ms. Lane.
Professor Blackwing! I didn't realize you were... I was just joking, of course. It's such a wonderful thing, this whole thing. It's so wonderful, really. Have you met Clark Kent?
I hear the exhibition is stunning.
I've spent years putting it together. Many of the artifacts have never left our tribal lands before. They are irreplaceable.
Cut back to the train where we see a few masked assailants are attacking it on these cool hover bike things. We'll talk about that in visuals. They look a little bit familiar if you've watched the original Batman the Animated Series run, as they blow a hole in the top of the train and begin going inside, looking through the artifacts that are on this train. Of course, Clark, with his super hearing, hears it, and I believe there's a news report as well that comes on that they're all aware of it. So Lois runs off to get the story while Clark runs off to handle things as Superman. And we quickly see him inside the train, taking on several masked assassins, using things like nunchucks and throwing stars and bolas. They are, of course, not of much use against the Man of Steel. He easily defeats the thugs, and then their leader, a woman, unmasks, and we see that it is Talia, of course, Ra's al Ghul's daughter. Superman doesn't know that yet, though, as he instead asks for an explanation.
The master said the shaman's staff would be here.
I believe this is your stop.
Get him!
think you're finished here.
I've already disabled the brakes. You can stop me or stop the train. The choice is yours.
And here's where Talia reveals that she's always one step ahead of these cape-wearing heroes, as she has already planted a bomb on the overpass that's going to, of the train tracks, and creates a giant explosion, meaning that Superman has a train to catch, quite literally. And so he has no choice but to let Talia abscond with the staff. And as he is trying in a little bit in vain to get some momentum enough to stop the train, kind of doing the Tobey Maguire and Spider-Man 2 thing, as he's not having much luck, the Batmobile arrives on the train tracks next to him, much to Superman's chagrin, quite frankly. He didn't expect to see Batman tonight. And Batman and Superman combined are finally able to stop the train. And as Batman surveys the scene, he lets Superman in on the secret that these are the Society of Shadows, which I guess is our new name. I feel like they had a slightly different name in BTOS, but now we're calling them Society of Shadows.
Just happen to be in the neighborhood?
Do you have any idea who they are? The Society of Shadows. I've been trailing them for weeks, hoping they'd lead me to Ra's al Ghul.
Who?
A criminal mastermind. More dangerous than the Joker and Luthor put together.
All I know is they were breaking the law in my town.
Leave it to you to charge in with both arms swinging.
If you were going to operate in Metropolis, you should have filled me in.
Next time I'll fax my itinerary.
I mean it. I'd like to help.
So they head off to a warehouse nearby where apparently the League was holed up, and they're investigating things together. They note that the staff is some sort of mystical healing staff that shamans used in Native American tribes.
This is where they met?
They're not coming back. Ra's is too smart to leave a trail. You said the only thing they took was the shaman's staff?
Yes. It's one of the least valuable items. According to Professor Blackwing, it's supposed to have mystic healing powers. Maybe your mastermind isn't feeling well.
He's usually in pretty good shape for a guy his age.
A bicycle?
Or wheelchair.
While they're discussing things, we see Lois heading back to her apartment, having apparently written up another great story on the events of the great train robbery. Not that one. and as she is walking, she goes into her closet. There's a great visual gag in here that we'll talk about, or that I don't know if you would call it a gag, but I thought it was funny. But as she opens her closet, we see a hand with some sort of gas pellet shoot out at her, knocking her out. And we then cut to Clark back at his apartment eating dinner, and he sees a news report that a woman has been tied to a clock tower. There's always a woman being tied to a clock tower, I swear. Actually, Mayor Hill got tied, so not just women. Men get tied to clock towers
Equal
too.
opportunity clock tower bondage.
That's right. But yes, so of course Superman sees the woman who certainly looks like Lois and springs into action, saving her just in time, only to reveal that it's actually not a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's Talia in Lois's clothing. And she reveals that she had to get Superman's attention somehow and thought that Lois's clothes would be a good way to get it started.
I've got you, Lois.
The name's Talia.
You?
Sorry for the theatrics, but I needed to get your attention.
You've got it. What's this all about?
My father would like to meet you, privately.
Your father?
Ra's al Ghul.
And if I refuse?
Then I'll have to insist.
She pulls off the staff, saying that she that her father is demanding an audience with Superman. Superman's not really interested, but it's clear here Talia isn't asking, as we now see that shaman staff, it's not just vibes. It's actually really magic and actually can heal someone apparently. But the way it apparently heals is by first draining the strength of another, and Talia is able to use that to take hold of Superman and capture him, leaving him unconscious on a rooftop. And Batman none the wiser as we move on into the second act of this episode with Superman in the clutches of Ra's and Talia.
That's right. And so Superman wakes up with some weird like metal neck brace, and his arms bound in a room. And he's introduced to a familiar voice that we hear. We'll talk about in voice acting, of course. Mm-hmm. But it is the voice of Ra's al Ghul, who back in the warehouse, Batman noted that there were some tire tracks that they were kind of confused about as to the origins of those. Potentially, Superman guesses maybe some sort of bicycle, and Batman, he's the world's greatest detective, he deduces it could be a wheelchair. So as we learn here, that wheelchair actually belongs to Ra's, who wheels in, and he's very, 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 very old, and appears to be close to death. He's looking a lot worse for wear than what we're usually used to.
I'm sorry we must meet under such circumstances.
You're not exactly what I pictured.
I'm not the man I was.
Father, you should rest.
Old age, Superman. It truly is a shipwreck. One that I have survived more times than I can remember.
He goes on to explain to Superman just who he is, gives a little exposition for those Superman fans that may be unfamiliar with how Ra's stays so youthful at his hundreds of years old, talking about the Lazarus Pit and his use of it. He explains how it has, for centuries, kept him young and youthful. However, as of recent, the effects of the Lazarus Pit seem to have been getting shorter and shorter between stints, and then ultimately seemingly no longer worked. So he reveals his master plan that he needs Superman for his strength.
But each time the effects were more and more short-lived. Now they can no longer sustain me.
He's dying.
What do you want from me?
Your strength.
We then cut back to Lois's apartment, where she wakes up only to be accosted by someone else. This time, however, it is someone who's a little bit more friendly, as she realizes that it is Batman, whom she calls Bruce, interestingly. A quick reminder, yeah, she knows who this guy is. See World's Finest, parts 1, 2, and 3, if you're not familiar with their little interaction there. But she has a brief conversation with Batman, where Batman realizes that Talia is the person that knocked her out. Lois seemingly, maybe a little jealous, implying Batman must know this woman on a first-name basis.
It's been a while. I take it this isn't a social call.
What happened here?
I'm not sure. Someone attacked me. A woman dressed in black.
Talia.
Talia? On a first-name basis, are we? What do you think she was after?
Your clothes.
Excuse me?
She needed to impersonate you to attract Superman.
Ha! She's going to need more than that. Maybe my clothes in a nuclear disaster. And I just had it shampooed. Do you know how depressing it is to have to clean up after your assailant?
I'm sorry.
Forget it. A little detergent and some elbow grease.
I mean that we're meeting like this.
Hey, I was the one who said goodbye, though I can't say I haven't had second thoughts. Actually, there's been several times when I almost picked up the phone. Maybe you felt the same way. I gotta get better locks.
As she turns to see if Bruce is still listening, wouldn't you know it? He did the disappearing act. He's gone. So whether he heard her or not is left up to the viewer's interpretation. We then see that Batman is in the Batmobile speaking with Alfred back in Gotham, who has done an analysis of the I guess the piece of clothing that was found on the shampoo, or the item that was found. He said that it contains jet fuel. This gives Batman a tip on where to go next. So we see Batman head to the airport where he finds, guess there's only one airport in the area, or maybe private hangars in the area. Batman just happened to pick the right one where the Society of Shadows happens to be hanging out. And there's quite the battle that happens between Batman and these guys as they're on their like air speeder bike things. So there's a fight that happens. Batman knocks quite a few of them out, and ultimately, I think several of them end up dying in a huge explosion because one of their bikes goes into a fuel tanker that ends up exploding in the hangar. But at least one of the men from the society survives, and Batman is able to interrogate him and ask him about the location of Raish. Meanwhile, we see the aforementioned Raish along with Talia and Ubu and several other of the secret society. I'm going to get that wrong. I'm going to say that at least 3 more times. The Society of Shadows, as they arrive in a lost city that we learn that Raish helped a bunch of people discover centuries ago. And we get here the secret origins, so to speak, of Raish's massive fortune and how he's able to sustain himself despite not having a real job for the last, 400 years or so. So, it's all of this looted gold from this lost city that he has. And they've dragged Superman there towards this really funky Hans Tesla, not Tesla, the current modern day company, Hans Tesla looking machine, and hangs Superman up on this machine. And they say that at this point, they're going to drain Superman's life using this shaman staff. But as they drag Superman towards where he's going to be planted for the ceremony to occur, he uses his heat vision to knock down part of the cave. Don't know if that's a stalactite or a stalagmite, but whichever one, scientist nerds, you can please feel free to tell us in the comments of this podcast or tweet at us at DCAU Review to let me know which one it was. But one falls from the ceiling, disrupting the ceremony and at least temporarily disabling and distracting some of the men. There's a brief attempt for Superman to escape, and it appears that he's going to actually make an escape. However, Raish keels over, and wouldn't you know it, that good-hearted Boy Scout is unfortunately undone by his kindness, and as he goes to check on Raish, he's actually attacked again by the shaman staff wielded by Talia. They once again incapacitate Superman, but unfortunately in the melee, Raish has passed away. And we see that it appears that Talia believes it too late for him. However, Ubu encourages her not to give up, and they decide that they're going to Talia encourages Ubu not to give up hope as they drag Superman back, and they say that as long as the body's still warm, they're going to attempt this power transfer. So we see Superman is rigged up as we get the shaman staff powered up, and it begins to transfer the power from Superman to Raish, and we see life slowly come back into his body, and he begins to change, get more youthful. But not just that, he begins to resemble a professional wrestler from the 1980s. This guy is jacked to the gills with veins popping. He's gone on that super creatine diet here, according to how Superman's powers affect him. So He begins standing up, and it seems like all is well for Raish and Talia. But instead of I guess this is what happens when you inject life into a body that's supposed to be dying, is that you just lose your mind regardless. Whether it's Lazarus Pit, Shaman staff, whatever happens, Raish is not satisfied with just being ripped and jacked as F. He is demanding all of the power for Superman and tells them that they need to continue. But wouldn't you know it, Raish's plans are foiled as thankfully the Dark Knight arrives on the scene to break up the party.
That's right. A well-placed batarang hits the switch on the machine and turns it off, cutting Ray off from his off from his new power supply and giving Superman a moment of respite. Batman springs into action, of course, quickly takes care of Ubu, but it's clear pretty quickly that he's no match for this very muscular and jacked, powerful version of Raish. Although with that newfound strength and power, Raish seems to have lost a little bit of his strategic mind as he begins damaging the machines that he needs to give him this new power. But he's so angry at Batman that he's simply decided he's going to take him out at all costs. As Raish and Batman continue to swing and punch around, the damage to the equipment causes part of the room to explode. We see Talia try to reason with her father, telling her that if the machine and the staff are damaged, that he won't be able to continue to drain Superman. But he's so single-minded in his quest to destroy Batman once and for all in this moment. He backhands her away, knocking her close to the edge of the cliff. And the staff goes flying as he grabs hold of Batman finally. He looks like he has the Dark Knight right where he wants him, finally ready to deliver the killing blow. However, the staff just happens to land right in front of a slowly recovering Superman, who is able to have just enough strength left to destroy the staff. Raish is furious and wants to attack Superman, but we then see the cliff where Talia is laying begins to crumble. She's barely holding on. And as Superman puts it, Raish only has time to do one thing, and that's either punish him or save Talia. And ultimately, Raish decides to try to save Talia as well. He goes over to the cliff, grabs hold of her, but then the rest of the ground beneath them gives way, and they both fall below into a river and splash into the water. Superman is able to grab hold of Batman and fly him to safety just as the whole place comes down, a cave-in, an explosion, everything's destroyed seemingly. But as Superman points out, using his X-ray vision, he can see that there's this long flowing river, but he can't find any trace of bodies, dead or alive, leaving us to believe that somehow, some way, perhaps Raish and Talia have escaped yet again.
I see an underground river, but there's no sign of them, alive or dead. I'm guessing you and that woman Talia had some history.
Pretty much in line with all my other relationships. I have to admit it was clever using Raish's devotion to his daughter to stop him.
Well, I thought as long as I couldn't charge in with both arms swinging, I better use my head. You know, there might be something to this partnership business after all.
Yeah, right.
Superman posts the question to Batman to explain just what his relationship was to this woman calling him beloved, though Batman chooses to dodge it a little bit and just say that it's pretty similar to all of his other relationships over the years. And as Batman gets in the Batplane to fly away, Superman notes that, hey, maybe there's something to this team-up business after all, to which we get a very sarcastic, although good-natured sarcastic, yeah, right, from Batman, as the Batplane flies off and Superman flies off in the other direction, and we pan up to the twilight, purpley skies of this random desert town as we fade to black for this week's episode. So we have now completed our recap. We'll get into our main thoughts on the plot here. it's a fun episode to get all these characters together, but whenever your thing is like a magic thing,
Mm-hmm.
that's just like, it's a staff. How does it work? Well, it just does.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not super into that as an idea. So the idea that it's just like, okay, this Native American staff can heal someone, but it heals you by draining the strength of another. It's like, okay, that's kind of interesting. But it feels like there should be better rules for it, because like Talia uses it to knock Superman out in one scene, but then they need this whole device to activate it to where they can drain Superman and give the power to Raish at the same time. That can only be done through this like weird, 40s sci-fi mad scientist machine they've created.
Right.
And then just everything blows up at the end. And I don't know. It's fun to have them all together, but the plot I felt was a little flat, and it felt more like a, hey, let's see what Raish and Talia are up to, and let's do another Superman Batman team up, and
Yeah.
and then we'll work backwards from there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I remember when we had dear friend of the show, Kevin Altieri, who obviously is almost solely responsible for a lot of the writing and the character work that was done, with obvious influences and stuff like that. He'd be the first to tell you the influences from the Denny O'Neil run, and Neil Adams run. But I think there is. I think when he said that Raish just doesn't feel like a Superman villain, I was like, maybe he's just being a little hard on it. He wasn't involved with it. Maybe he just, if he had been involved, he would have different thoughts. But at the core of this episode, I couldn't help but that sticking with me, and that it feels like they had to jump through a bunch of hoops to make Raish an adversary that was somehow a threat to Superman, and that was by creating this MacGuffin that was this magic thing that does this magic thing that is tied to Raish's continued existence, which the other magic thing that Raish has been using no longer works. So he figured out that this magic thing could be the thing that helps him going forward. So, yeah, I think that I agree with you. This is it's always fun, Batman Superman teaming up. It's always fun to see these characters interact. You have stuff that plays off of their first interaction. The line that Batman says when he shows up, that Superman went in fist blazing or whatever he says, like fist first without thinking, and then that's kind of paid off at the end when we see the conversation where Superman used his brain and tells Batman, yeah, I thought about that. I used my brain to ultimately thwart Raish in the end. Is great. Like, I think that's kind of fun. We see the dynamic of their relationship growing, instead of having the resentment that we see solely them having in that first interaction in World's Finest. We see that over the months, years, who knows how long it's been, but over time, their relationship has become one of respect, even if Batman still feels like he has to be like the teacher and feels an air of superiority over Superman with how he handles things. But yeah, there's some interesting things here. I think at the heart of this episode, though, when you get down to like the actual plot of it, it's maybe a little goofy. It's hard. We try not to relitigate things but we somehow wind up doing it so often. So I'll just go ahead and continue the tradition here. But I wonder if this story would have been better served as Raish has moved on from Batman as his heir, and he instead tries to convince Superman to be his heir. I think that would have been interesting. Maybe you tie in the real history of Krypton. Raish has learned about how Krypton blew up, and he uses that to try and leverage Superman into having some sort of crisis to determine whether or not he would accept this role as lord over the world or whatever. It would probably be a very short conversation based on Superman's character, but I think that could have been slightly more interesting than the magic MacGuffin is going to drain Superman's. Like, is it going to kill him? I don't know. Maybe. Doesn't say. It's draining his strength. It's also it's drained his strength enough where he can't break out of metal, but he can still use his power, like some of his powers, enough to use his heat vision. I don't know. It's just not very explored or explained very well. So, it's fun though. I'm not going to discount the fun, the fun scale for this episode is great. It's just Batman and Superman, which there's other crossover episodes we've yet to review, but those episodes were not Batman and Superman either. It's Superman and Robin, it's Batgirl and Supergirl for our crossovers that we've yet to cover really. So another Batman Superman crossover here pre Justice League is kind of fun to have them working on the same case. Batman doing the detective work is fun for this episode. He does get a lot of detective-y things to do, with the assist from Alfred. But yeah, so there is fun here. However, I think the overall plot, if you hold it up to a strong critique, it falls short when it comes to that. And again, like I said, going back to what Kevin said, it does lead you to believe that maybe Ra's should have just kind of been left as a adversary to the Dark Knight versus bringing in Superman there. It does just kind of feel weird, the amount of hoops he had to jump through to make him a villain in this case.
Yeah, I think there's interesting elements like you said, and I think one of the things that they touch on, albeit very briefly, is that, boy, Batman's broken a lot of hearts, huh? Like you touch on his relationship with Lois, brief as it may have been. You touch on, or it's at least acknowledged that he has this romantic history with Talia as well. It's like and again, maybe this is like an example of an episode that could have been two parts, because maybe part of it could or should have been Bruce reckoning with like his loneliness and his lack of sustained romantic success in his life, particularly with women voiced by Dana Delaney. But just in general, I think that's like an interesting note to, I like that there's a scene between Batman and Lois to pull on that history. But yeah, because it ends up just being this kind of, well, he talks to her for a second and then he goes fight some guys in a warehouse or an airplane hangar, and then there's just a big punch up and a bunch of explosions at the end. So yeah, overall, like I said, it's fun. I didn't dislike it by any means, but I just don't think this just doesn't feel like it's ironed out enough to really warrant it. And yeah, I think maybe there is something to what you said and what Kevin has said, that in order to make Superman not able to just, like with a lot of Batman's villain, and they successfully do it, I think, with the Joker, and to a lesser extent with Bane and some of those other characters that show up in nighttime. It's hard to make Batman's villains work against Superman, because why can't Superman just solve all of this in 2 seconds? And so you have to kind of invent reasons for it. And I like the bit where they set off the bomb to get his attention and all that, like they're diverting his attention, but then it just becomes, we have a magic stick, and that's less interesting to me. So overall, I say all of that to say still a solid time. I gave it a 5 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I went just 1 point higher. I went with a 6 out of 10. I think it's just the fun quotient of seeing all of these characters interact, Bruce and Clark interacting, Talia and Superman interacting. Even if it doesn't make the most sense, if you turn your brain off, you can kind of have some fun with the whole thing. And then, as you said, the interactions between Bruce and Lois, and then of course, I really think the little bow on the end of Batman and Superman interacting there, and Bruce being sarcastic, lovingly sarcastic about not really enjoying the partnership thing as he flies away is a fun little bow on the end there with a fun musical cue that we'll talk about once we get to music. But yeah, so I went with a 6 out of 10 for mine, so just 1 point higher.
Nice. From there, we will move on to visuals and animation. And once again, we have this episode was directed by friend of the show, Dan Reba. And of course, we have animation services provided by Coco and Dong Yang. So let's just get this out of the way right away, Cal. What the heck happens to Batman between acts in this episode?
Well, I assume that you're referring to the time that we see him leave Lois's apartment to the airplane hangar where he is suddenly morphed into the model from the new Batman Adventures kind of standard model to all of a sudden he looks like he's gone on Ozempic and his ears are now like 40% longer. It's quite interesting and quite noticeable that from that point on, for the rest of the episode, his ears are sedang long. It's very confusing. It's very notable.
Yeah, it's just strange. And it's one of those things we've talked about this quite a few times, certainly going back to the original BTOS run, different episodes, depending on the animation studio, depending on the directors and the storyboard artists, there'd be a little variation in that Batman model. And we always say, as long as it's consistent for that episode, we sort of liken it to, issues of a comic book being drawn by different artists. Not every character looks the same. That's from issue to issue or episode to episode. But it's really jarring that he's square as ever in the first act of this episode, wide and square jawed and short eared as we're used to seeing in this new Batman Adventures look. And then all of a sudden he's svelter and the ears are they're Batman Beyond length, if maybe even longer than the Justice League
Did
length.
Kelly Jones take over storyboarding in the middle of this of this episode is the only thing that I can think of. I'd be interested. Maybe we can eventually get a friend of the show, Dan Reba, back on to talk about something like this because it is bizarre. I want to say, I don't know if there was a commentary. I may be just pulling this out of nowhere, but I feel like that there was a commentary on this episode, maybe on one of the DVDs, where they even mentioned like the length of the ears happening. It's not in the DCAU wiki, so maybe I'm pulling that out of nowhere, but it does just feel like, I don't know, like me. And we know that this is around the time, obviously Batman Beyond is going strong here. We have they're starting, I guess, maybe the very beginning production work on Justice League stuff. So we have that.
If this airs at the end of 1999, then I mean Batman Beyond's already been on the air for 10 months or 11 months or whatever. So this is that weird era where they had 3 shows in like full production at once.
Maybe somebody forgot then. Like somebody was like, "Oh yeah, this is how his ears look," and then they just like, "Oh no, this is the old Batman. He's not supposed." Well, too late now. And then maybe is it possible that they looked at this and they were like, "He actually looks pretty dang cool. Maybe we should adapt for his permanent costume in Justice League."
Yeah, maybe this is the accidental blueprint for what we get down the road in Justice League. But yeah, that's the most jarring thing about the episode. Now we can talk about things we like too, but I thought that was kind of the number one note. I mean, it's fun to see. We get the League of Assassins or Society of Shadows. The Spider-Man guys are back, which is fun. The symbiote Spider-Man, big white Todd McFarlane eyes. Eye masks are super fun. I like those characters those designs being used again into the TNBA Superman era. It's fun to have Talia back, and we get this like weird the old decrepit Raish in his little. I love that he still has a green, like he's kept his color scheme going. He's got a green like bathrobe that he's in. He's putzing around the old folks home, the supervillain old folks home, but he's still got to keep the the color coordination, which I respect. But yeah, that's a great design. Like he looks really decrepit and creepy. The moment where he looks at Superman and says, "I need your strength," and he kind of gets this like weird smile on his face. I'm like, ugh, that's he's like missing most of his teeth, or at least they didn't draw most of his teeth. It's a really striking design. Talia and Ubu pretty much just look like they're I would liken them to sort of the Harley Quinn TNBA redesign, where it's like they basically took the exact same model and just sharpened up the lines a little bit. They all pretty much look the same. And then we get this crazy Hulk race that shows up at the end, complete with the torn pants and the giant bulging biceps and veins and all that. I mean, it's a crazy design. It's weird. It reminds me of like the first Arkham Asylum game where you fight like 400 big muscled up guys that run. You have to dodge while they run into walls. It feels like, I was like, oh, this kind of feels like a boss fight thing, like in a video game where he gets super powered for the final fight. So that's kind of a fun sequence. It's a wacky design, and then yeah, I mean, we get some fun. Honestly, I feel like Batman, even though it's a Superman episode, Batman gets the coolest stuff, like the fire, walking out of the fire in the plane hangar to interrogate the guard at the end. Even his entrance when the Batmobile just pops up next to Superman as he's stopping the train. I feel like a lot of my visual notes were Batman stuff, despite it being a Superman episode.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that let me just say, this is my least favorite like style of Superman and Batman when it comes to like, I love my TMS Superman, like beefy, like large barrel chested. This is like squared, slim down Superman. So not my favorite of the two animation styles that we end up getting for Superman the animated series. So I'm not a huge fan of how he's not very muscular. Like Batman and Superman are basically the same size in this for a lot of the episode, it feels like. So I was not a fan of that. But ultimately, yeah. Did you note, speaking of Batman Beyond, I think that also lends to the credibility that this could have been confused by Batman Beyond storyboard artists. The Batarang that Batman throws is essentially the Beyond Batarang. It's shaped more like the bat signal itself versus like the logo on the bat signal versus the traditional Batarang or even the new Batman Adventures Batarang. It's much more squat, and it's like lengthwise, its wingspan is a little bit taller than you're used to. It much akin to the Batman Beyond Batarang. I don't know if you caught that or not.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily note the specific Beyond comparison, but yeah, with our theme of the long years, yeah, maybe there was a board artist or someone ported over that had only worked on Beyond. But yeah, they are a bit rounded off. It's definitely not the regular TNBA Batarang, the flip open. I think we do see one or two of those in the episode, but then yeah, later it's definitely changed into a more like disc style logo than the full bat that we normally see. So yeah, there's some really kind of weird and off model inconsistencies there. Like I said, I still think there's some cool stuff in the episode too, like we've talked about, but yeah, it's not a home run visually, and for that reason, I actually settled on a 6 out of 10 for my visuals. I think there's some cool Batman stuff. I like Superman and him. There's a neat bit where Superman's using his X-ray vision, and we see like his point of view, and we look over and we see like Batman's skeleton while he's looking at something, which I thought was kind of neat because we don't really get that perspective. Or usually it's we just see through a wall or whatever with Superman. We don't see him X-raying people too often. So I thought that was a neat gag to actually make it look like an X-ray machine instead of just a magic eyesight. It's kind of a neat gag too. So
yeah,
overall I went 6 out of 10.
Yeah, I just went 1 point lower, or I went a 5 out of 10 for mine. It was very, very hard to ignore the fact that Batman changed appearances midway through. It was just very distracting. It's just very, very obvious because of how much screen time Batman has. And it's like, wow, he looks very, very different than he did in the first half or quarter of this episode. So, yeah, I went with a 5 out of 10. A couple of other brief notes. You had mentioned it when we were doing our little synopsis here. The Lois closet gag where she where she opens up the closet and there's just one other one other suit in there, or purple.
Yes.
Her purple suit that just happens to be sitting in there as the
Mhm.
only other clothes that appear in that closet at that time. I thought that that was very funny. Whether it was a meta commentary about how the fact that Lois has one other one other outfit or not. That was funny and noted, or at least I interpreted it as a meta commentary. Yeah, I think the fight I think really the visual highlight for the episode has to be the fight in the hangar between Batman and this society. There's a lot of stuff that's happening with these little like flying motorbike speeder things that are flying around, these like little flying Vespas essentially that these guys are on. There's a couple of brutal takedowns that Batman has on these guys. As we said, the bikes flying into different things, the bikes flying into the airplane, the bikes flying into the back of the fuel tanker. That scene, I think, that Batman's ears notwithstanding, I think is probably the standout visually for the episode. But yeah, there's unfortunately the good and the bad sort of equal out here with our scores. So that led to our lower scores for this week.
Absolutely. Yeah, fun. I do love the we only get like glimpses of the actual hidden city, but like the conquistador skeletons with all the gold jewels and stuff is a cool visual. Like again, something like a really cool background that we see for 2 seconds, unfortunately. But yes, with that out of the way, we will move on to music. And I'll be honest, a lot of my notes are the character themes. We get a lot of the Batman theme. And then, as you mentioned, Cal, we have one fun little bit at the end of the episode after Batman and Superman have had their little back and forth about the idea of teaming up more often. As both men fly away via their various means, we get the new Batman and Superman Adventures theme that, of course, played for history for posterity, because I don't know if there's any version of the Blu-rays or streaming or anything where that theme is still used anywhere. I think the DVD version was the last time it was available. But so there in the US at least, it was not aired as the new Batman Adventures and Superman the Animated Series as two distinct shows. Instead, there would just be a block, I think like twice a morning on Kids WB on Saturdays and during the weekdays this week, that were just referred to as the new Batman Superman Adventures, and you never knew if it was going to be a Superman or a Batman. It was just because it was just called that. So, and each episode, whether it was a Superman or a Batman, instead of having those characters shows themes play, it would be this awesome new Batman and Superman Adventures theme. It has a few original art pieces. It's mostly just clips from the two shows, but it was great to hear that piece of music again, just because we don't really ever get to hear it or talk about it, because it's kind of been lost to time with the Blu-ray and more modern streaming ports of the shows. So that's a fun one to be able to talk about, just because we rarely ever do.
Yeah, I agree. It was actually a very pleasant surprise too, because as you mentioned, we get the Batman, Shirley Walker Batman gets played twice, at least. And then a lot of the fight sequences, of course, have some good background music that really communicate the feelings or the vibe of what's happening in the scene that you're watching. But we didn't really hear the Superman theme. And then at the very end there, even right before, it kind of sounds like the Superman theme is coming in, and then it just morphs into this theme, which, as you mentioned, for a certain era of watching these cartoons, this was the theme that you would hear before the episode played. So while you would hear maybe the characters' individual themes played in their episodes, of course, that was the theme that maybe a certain generation of viewers would associate with the theme songs for these particular shows here in the US at least. I wonder if it was, if you're an international listener, please let us know if this was played during international blocks also, wherever you watched the new Batman Adventures and Superman the Animated Series, because obviously they've released this track on, I think there was a maybe DC 70 or something like that. They released, or 75, they did a series of a whole soundtrack of different theme songs from cartoons over the year, and that was one of the ones that they released on there. But yeah, as Liam said, it's mainly kind of gone the way of the dodo on recent releases. I don't think it's on streaming or anything like that, unless you're watching maybe a less than reputable place might have it on on their streaming copy, not the wonderful HBO Max or wherever it is that you're watching Jeff Bezos' own network. But yeah, I would say those are the highlights, the main things that stuck out. But those were that's theme hit at the end, and the nice little bow that it wrapped up with, this little conversation between Batman and Superman, just hit me right in the right spot at the right time. Yeah. And then of course the Batman theme showing up, Shirley Walker Batman theme showing up when the Batmobile shows up, and then when he saves the day and interrupts the whole ceremony with Superman later on, also hit really well. So for those reasons, I gave music a very strong 9 out of 10. I think wow. The fact that this is the one and only, is, to my recollection, appearance of this, again, it feels almost somewhat meta here. It's the new Batman Superman Adventures theme coming in as Batman and Superman are having this conversation on screen. It really solidifies that theme as it's canon. The theme is canon for the series. It's not just hey, this is on Kids WB and this is the intro for that. So I loved it. I loved that little, albeit brief moment there, but brought a smile to my face and made me punch the air. So 9 out of 10 for me. What about you?
I love that. I wasn't quite as generous, though. I definitely think the reason my score ended up as high is for the exact same reason that we just talked about. My score is a 7 out of 10, so still very strong. I did also have the Batman theme notes, as you did. And I think there's some really good music when when Superman and Batman are working together to stop the train. That's pretty strong as well. So good work by Mr. McQuistion this week. And that will bring us to our final category of the day, Cal, which is, of course, our voice actors. Some familiar names to talk about, even though a lot of them are in small roles, and a sort of new voice actor for Talia, though we've already talked about her once before.
That's right, Liam. We'll talk about this week's voice actors and actresses. So briefly, in one of the small roles, we had Jeff Glenn Bennett, of course, one of those voices that you're going to hear, I feel like, until the end of this podcast, you're going to hear him in some form or fashion from his roles there. Briefly, we also had Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. as Alfred. What I love about this interaction with Alfred, by the way, is he gets a thank you from Bruce. Like, he's doing work for Bruce, and Bruce says, goes out of his way to say thank you, Alfred. Like, he's not just didn't just shut off the computer once Alfred gave him the information. But yeah, I enjoyed that as well. We also briefly had Michael Horse, who did dual roles here for this episode. He played Professor Blackwing, and he also voiced Ubu for this episode. He is mostly known for some minor TV roles. It looks like he did some stuff on the cult classic Twin Peaks from the late 80s and early 90s. He was in 28 episodes of that. He played the deputy, Tommy Hawk Hill, on there. He also played Tonto in a Legend of the Lone Ranger movie back in the early 80s also. So there's something to put on your resume, if you will. And then some other minor roles there as far as acting is concerned. A bunch of minor roles in some television shows, and he actually was a part of looks like the Twin Peaks reboot also that they did about a decade or so ago. So yeah, not a lot for him to do as the professor there. It is funny, of course, the interaction that we get where we have Lois kind of just being obliviously being disrespectful to the Native American heritage of Professor Blackwing here. So he gets a funny insert there, deadpan line, and of course he's talking to Tim Daly's Superman about the artifacts, but then more I guess to do as Ubu, which is fine. It's fine. Not a ton for him to do. I don't think there's anything that was negative from the interactions that I saw. He does seem very sullen once it appears that Raish has passed away. So I bought that. Sure. And then we have John Rubano, who's playing one of the news anchors briefly on the episode. He had a couple of other minor roles in the DCAU, nothing of note though. And then we really get into our main cast after that, I guess. We of course, actually briefly, in a very small, funny role, he was the only vocal member of the Society of Shadows. We have Townsend Coleman. NBC Must-See TV, the voice of the Tick himself. Townsend Coleman shows up in a brief role there to get interrogated by Batman later. But then we really get into the meat of our roles here, Liam. As you mentioned, we have a new voice for Talia, at least chronologically here. Of course, we have already discussed Olivia Hussey is playing Talia. She would go on to play Talia again in Batman Beyond, in Out of the Past, and she of course is replacing the great Helen Slater. And Miss Hussey unfortunately passed away at the end of 2024. But I think she does a decent job. I think in a way her voice is a little less, I would say, soft. I would say maybe she comes across when Miss Slater was giving the lines. I could feel the romance between her and Bruce, and obviously there's not a lot of interaction that Miss Hussey has with the Batman character in this episode, but it did not come across as that sort of soft, romancy feel when she's interacting with Superman. It's not bad, I don't think, but it is a difference. You can tell it's not Miss Slater doing the voice, but I shan't speak ill of her of Miss Hussey's performance here. I think she did what was asked of her personally.
Yeah, I think she does a good job. To your point, she certainly gets a bit more to do later on in Batman Beyond and Out of the Past, which we've talked about previously. You can check out the archives to hear our thoughts on her performance there. But yeah, she's just more of a, I don't know, she has like a Bond girl energy to her. Like she's just more sinister, like and doesn't really have any of that warmth that we had in the previous version by Miss Slater, which again is not, to your point, not really Miss Hussey's fault, because she's given not very many lines of dialogue other than exposition explaining what the staff is and who Ra's al Ghul is and all that. So yeah, she does a solid job, though. Yes, it's hard not to miss Miss Slater's performance and sort of the depth that she was able to bring to the character, certainly.
And again, I didn't mention, but Miss Hussey probably most known for her roles in Romeo and Juliet when she was just a very young girl. I think she was 14 or something in 1968's Romeo and Juliet. She also played in the TV adaptation of Stephen King's It in 1990. She was Audra in that. And then a lot of other voice acting credits to her name and some Star Wars stuff, Pinky and the Brain, some other stuff there to her name. So rest in peace to her. Liam, we also have, of course, returning the great David Warner, also late David Warner, who we lost in 2022. What's to say about, a guy with the acting chops and just the vocal gravitas that Mr. Warner had? I think regardless of whether or not you or I enjoyed how they fit Ra's into this episode, it would have felt even more alien for Superman, or pun intended, for him to show up in Superman and be voiced by anyone else than the great Mr. Warner, because boy, he just has, even in the maniacal moments of like you mentioned, that one line where he leans in and says, "I want your strength," like it feels like that character is coming through the screen when he leans into the point of view shot there, and that voice comes through. Just what a commanding vocal performance from Mr. Warner, who obviously was well into figuring out what this character's role was in this series or in this universe. So yeah, a great performance turned in by Mr. Warner.
Absolutely, yeah. And he gets to do a little bit of when he's playing the old sickly race, he kind of has a little bit of an extra labor to the way he's breathing and the way he's speaking. And then it sort of transitioned once he's been, reconstituted by the magic staff. He gets, it's very much the classic, very loud and commanding David Warner voice, and the way he kind of transitions from one to the other is very impressive. Yeah, the consummate professional, as they say, and yeah, he really brought it. Even if the words he was saying left a little to be desired, that's nothing to do with Mr. Warner, who does a great job.
That's right. Before we get to our world's finest here, we'll briefly mention Dana Delaney, of course, as Lois Lane. Not a ton for her to do this week. Obviously, she's incapacitated for a portion of the episode. She's kind of a means to an end for Talia and Raish to get to Superman. So she's kind of a pawn, so to speak, here. So she doesn't get a ton of lines. She obviously has that very funny interaction where she inserts her foot into her mouth unintentionally at the beginning with the professor. And that's kind of fun as she stumbles over her words a little bit there. And then we get the softer moment where she's interacting with Bruce later on. It's funny when Bruce mentions that Talia steals her clothes in order to get Superman's attention. We get a little bit of the jealousy from Lois there also, like on the Superman end of things, like how much she wants Superman's attention. In her line, she mentions that it would take more than just her clothes. It would take that plus, or her and a nuclear bomb or something like that. I think she says is the line. So yeah, some good stuff here. I think the real moment here is the soft kind of downtrodden moment that she has where she's kind of expressing borderline regret or second guessing her choice to end the relationship with Bruce. And then, of course, is only disappointed to turn around to find that Bruce has already left her. So maybe solidifying her decision there once she realizes that Batman has already left.
Yeah, she's got some good lines, as you mentioned, and in that sequence, a little vulnerability, a little sarcasm, and of course she gets, as we mentioned, the very funny scene where she's talking to the guy that's putting on the museum display as well. So yeah, a lot of lighthearted moments for her in this episode, and then also, as you said, the kind of sweet, more vulnerable stuff between her and Batman. As brief as it is, she does a great job.
That's right. And then, of course, last but not least is going to be our world's finest. So another fun and maybe appropriate trivia tidbit from the DCAU wiki. This is our final on-screen DCAU interaction between Tim Daly's Superman and Kevin Conroy's Batman, because obviously Superman will go on to be recast in Justice League with George Newbern taking over the role of the Man of Steel here. So obviously Tim Daly and Kevin Conroy did get additional interactions in some of those DC animated projects, including Public Enemies, which we reviewed last year for Super Fantasm Month. If you want to hear our review of that, check it out in the archives. But yeah, it's a little bittersweet to know that this was the last time, at least in the DCAU canon, that our original Superman and of course our one and only Batman got to interact here. But it's fun. Like I said, I think both Mr. Conroy and Mr. Daly do a wonderful job in the little brief moments that we get here where they're kind of going back and forth. Bruce's line about Clark rushing into things fist first and only thinking with his fists and not using his brain, and then Clark's comeback to that at the end is a fun little interaction. And Clark, of course, Superman gets lots of lines in between interacting with David Warner and Miss Hussey's Talia. So we do get a lot more, I feel like, Tim Daly than we do Kevin Conroy in this. But Kevin Conroy's got some pretty intense lines here, especially when he threatens Townsend Coleman's thug. Where I'm only going to tell you this or ask you this once. Where's Ra's al Ghul? Like that delivery, send chills up my spine. Just man, I feel like this episode is another reminder for why these guys were cast in these roles. Just like they are in their element here for an episode like this.
Yeah, and it's funny contrasting that, you mentioned George Newbern. I feel like in Justice League we sort of transitioned into them being just a bit more chummy. They're still very sarcastic with each other, but it feels a little bit more warm and friendly. And this episode feels like this is like the transition to them getting to that chummy status that they have later on, because there is still this very like Batman is talking down to him a lot, like at the start of the episode about marching in, hands swinging or whatever, and Superman kind of has to be like, "Hey, man, this is my gig too, like, and it's my city, so I'm tagging along. Like, I'm gonna work on this with you." And their sort of interactions together is good, and then the little bit of chatting they get to do at the end with when they're talking about Talia and everything is, yeah, it's a lot of fun. Like we said, Tim Daly, Superman, is incapacitated for a lot of the episodes, so then yes, we do get a lot of solo Batman adventuring in the middle here, and he gets to interact. Mr. Conroy gets to interact with, as you mentioned, Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. and Dana Delaney, and then finally makes his grand appearance. But yeah, I did have that in my notes as well. The where's Ra's al Ghul, just that extra little growl in his voice. It's like, well, I'd tell them what I knew. you know, that's a great bit as well. So yeah, great work from Mr. Conroy. And like I said, as you said, just how well he and Tim Daly played off of each other in this sort of transition phase of the Batman Superman friendship, where they tolerate each other, but they're still a little bit, irritated and dismissive of each other's strengths and weaknesses. I think this is a fun episode for them to showcase that.
Yeah, I felt like based on everybody's performance is super. I mean, it's super solid from the top down. Well, from below the top, and then when you get to the top, I think it's exquisite. So, I went with a 9 out of 10 for my score here. I think there's just these are just powerhouses in the voice acting community, and in the DCAU that are all interacting with each other. It's fun to see, Tim Daly interacting with David Warner. This is the one and only time that you get that. And again, plot be damned, it's fun to hear these characters talking to each other. And yeah, so 9 out of 10 for me. It's a great episode and fun, and I think this is what you want out of a voice cast if we're talking DCAU.
Absolutely. Yeah, they do a fantastic job. I went just 1 point lower with an 8 out of 10 for my voice acting score, but still a very strong showing from, again, some of the pros, most professional of all the pros that Andrea Romano got to direct as the voice director on this show and all these shows. So great job from all of our principal cast this week. And with that, Cal, that will bring us to our final scores of the day. And tallying everything up, I have a final score of 26 out of 40.
And for the first time in this calendar year, at least the return at the time of recording, I am actually coming in at a higher final score than you for the day, and that is going to be a 29 out of 40. So a little bit, I liked things just a little bit more. I was a little more generous this week. Maybe it was the Superman and Batman crossover of it all. I don't know. But definitely, either way, better than last week's score. So there you go.
Absolutely. And I mean, talking about rewatchability, honestly, of all of the Super Bat team ups, this might be the one that has the best case for not needing to rewatch it. Because it's not really referenced. We know, thanks to some dialogue and Out of the Past, that this is not the last time Bruce fights Ra's. And it's not really ever referenced again. Talia and Ra's never try to go after Superman again. They never interact again. Ra's doesn't have any appearances in the Justice League era, so you could probably argue this is a skip, but only because, hey, there's only 4 or 5 of these, if you count individual episodes, I guess a couple more, but of these Batman Superman team ups, so maybe that makes all of them worth rewatching just for the novelty of the rare team up episode. So I maybe could convince myself of a 1 thumb up for rewatchability for this. What about you?
What if I told you that this was the origins of Batman's look in Justice League, though, and that therefore this
Wow.
is the only explanation for why his costume changes so much in Justice League? No, I kid, of course. Yeah, I think this is. No, I don't know. I think I'm all in. These are the episodes where, yeah, it's not pivotal going forward. However, it's a Ra's al Ghul episode. It's part of his arc. So you gotta talk about that. I mean, it's something. It's a bridge to get you from where he was in Avatar to where he is in Batman Beyond, I guess. And I mean, it's a Batman Superman crossover. You gotta watch all the crossover episodes, right? With the exception of Zeta and Batman Beyond, those don't count. Strike them from the record. But these are the fun ones. This is where all the fun is had. If you're gonna sit aside and be like, you know what, this person that I know doesn't have any interest in watching, the last season of Superman. Okay, well then watch this episode. All right. Also, in the last run of Superman, speaking of like Unity and Superman's pal and a bunch of the other season 3-ish episodes of Superman, this one is probably top tier. Since Legacy is technically season 4. So yeah, I would say probably 2 thumbs up for me.
Nice. I love that. I shot. No need to break out the disagreement alarm for that. I think it's a point well argued. And with that out of the way, that will begin to wrap us up. Cal, thank you everybody so much for listening and supporting our podcast. However you do it, as mentioned, one of the best ways to support us is to head to buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review. And if you are a monthly supporter, that comes with a perk that allows you to ask us a question. And our friend Zach is back this week with yet another question for the Demon Reborn.
That's right. And he does preface this by saying that's a dorky question, but that's okay because I think typically the dorkier, the better.
Agreed.
The questions that we get here. So he does preference this, like I said, super dorky. He says, I know time had passed and writers had changed, etc. But I think it would have been really interesting if Ra's was restored and he brought Arkady Duval, his son from Showdown, with him to also restore him as well. What are your thoughts? Well, it's interesting that Zach says this because I thought originally when we watched this episode to begin with, I think back in, what did we say? This was 1999. My first thought when they talk about the wheelchair tracks, if you recall, Arkady was also in a wheelchair at the end of the episode with Ra's. So my thought at the time was, oh, we're going to see he's got a wheelchair because he's got Arkady Duval with him. That's why, because the last we saw Ra's, that's what he did. He boarded a plane with Talia and Ubu and Arkady Duval. They went back on the plane. So that was my thought, that we were going to see him here. So interestingly enough, we don't get a resolution to what happened to Arkady. So yeah, I think that would have been a nice little bow here, and maybe just a little. Now, I think you probably would have very much had to have. You would have had to do some exposition, which they probably didn't want to do. They had a little exposition to explain what the Lazarus pits were, and adding a character that was from this niche episode that was probably not super loved by kids at the time. Let's be honest. This episode that featured like 10 seconds of Batman in it. Let's be honest. The explaining who this guy in a wheelchair was that Ra's was carrying along would have taken some screen time and some explanation. But honestly, maybe that's a better story of him looking to drain Superman's powers because the Lazarus Pit is not able to restore Arkady Duval. That, honestly, that's an interesting story right there. So, yeah, Zach, I like the idea of him being there, but I understand why maybe it wasn't the easiest thing for them to do to try and drag that part of the story forward into this Superman-Batman crossover that you already had all these other moving parts with.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I had not given this thought. I didn't even think about the wheelchair line, about thinking that could be a red herring, or that someone would invoke Arcady for that. But I think that's kind of brilliant. I do think that's more interesting, especially because we do see, despite how much, when we see the flashback sequence, how much Ra's seems to hate Arcady, and he does have that very tender moment with him where he just says, let me take my boy home," or whatever he says at the end of Showdown, like, where it is a very where he has become a bit more sentimental about him, and maybe there would be this one last ditch effort when even the Lazarus Pit couldn't save his son. And I also think it's just interesting if you build out that, like, I like the idea of Raish having like a larger menagerie than just Talia and Nubu and a bunch of generic guys. So the idea of him having a son, or possibly, I mean, he mentions, in that episode again, I think, like, of course I had more than one offspring. So you feel like there could be, dozens, if not hundreds, of Raish's spawn around the world. Like, he could be like the Genghis Khan of the DCAU, it feels like. Um, but yeah, you do wonder if that could have been something. So I like that idea. And as we talked about, I think at the end of last year, when we had Jordan Gibson on, we were talking about well, like, wacky origins for how Scarecrow got his new look, and I'm like, just make it super fan servicey. Why not? So I'm always like, yeah, bring that guy back. Is there room for that character? You could argue that there's not, and you have to do so much explaining of who he is and blah blah blah. I'm like, I don't care. Do it anyway. Do the fan servicey thing. It's fun sometimes. So even if you didn't think it was a great idea from that, or that there wasn't time, I feel like, yeah, whatever. For the same reason that it's kind of fun that the Phantasm's in epilogue and all that. I think it's, you could make an argument for Duval showing up and being a part of this episode as well. So I love that question from Zach as well. And as mentioned, if you would like to have your question read on a future episode, you can head to buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review today and become a monthly supporter, and we appreciate people who do choose to support us that way. Another monetary way you can support us is, of course, to head into the show notes of this very episode. You'll see a link to our store page where you can pick yourself up a hat or a shirt or a mug or something. That's a great way. And then there are, of course, all of the free ways to support us. Follow us on the socials. We're at DCAU Review on Twitter/X, on Instagram, and even those ancillary backup sites that we don't really remember to use very often, like Threads and Blue Sky. You can find us all on those. Although, if you're trying to get in touch with us with any sort of expediency, I would definitely recommend the Twitter or Instagram options. That's a great way to also keep in touch with various DCAU news going on, and also upcoming reviews, things like that we're always posted on there. So that's a great way to support us. And of course, the best, perhaps, and easiest free way to support us, just make sure you're subscribed to us on your podcast app that you're using. If it lets you give us a rating, give us 5 stars. If it lets you leave a review like it does on Apple Podcasts, you can go ahead and leave us a review. And if you leave us a 5-star review, we'll even send you a little gift as a thank you for that. So those are some great free ways. And of course, head to the links in the show notes as well for our link to our current, and it's not really new anymore, but it's our current YouTube channel, our own YouTube channel there. We're slowly ramping up in our subscribers, and even if you don't listen to your podcast through YouTube, we would appreciate you subscribing as we work to get more of the archived episodes up, and also our new episodes go up there every Saturday as well. We would appreciate that. But however you choose to support us and however you choose to listen to us, we hope you'll come back next week, Cal, when we stay in Metropolis, but we turn the clocks back, so to speak.
That's right, Liam. As we mentioned, so this was, by the way, in the run of Superman, the 52nd episode of the show. So after this, 2 more episodes, there was 54 total. So we've only got 1 episode left, I think, that we haven't reviewed of this show that we're hanging on to, which means, what are we going to do? That's right. We're going to look back in the archives, and, we have reviewed all but 1 of Superman the Animated Series episodes thus far. But as we have done several different times, we've decided to go back and take a look at some of the episodes that we covered on earlier episodes of the podcast, and that includes a lot of Superman episodes. We blew through a ton of really interesting and memorable episodes of Superman the Animated Series within those early, probably 50 episodes. And a lot of them, unfortunately, because we were still getting our footing at the time and figuring out how we wanted to look at the podcast, we really didn't devote the proper time or discussion into those really great episodes. And one of those episodes was way back on episode 14 of the podcast. Here we are today, episode 387. So you do the math. But that episode was maybe one of the best of the entire series, an episode that is almost universally loved by Superman the Animated Series fans. Delves into a lot of interesting visuals. I remember that from our review of it. But we'll go ahead and we are going to look back at actually an episode that is in our top picks. So it's not as if we maybe got this wrong, but we're going to take a look at our scores. We're going to go in depth on the actual plot and talk about some of the visuals and give this episode its due. Liam, we're re-reviewing The Late Mr. Kent next week on the podcast.
Absolutely, Cal. Can't wait to revisit that one. Certainly one of my favorite episodes of the series. And as you mentioned, one we definitely did not devote enough time to the first time around some 6 or 7 years ago whenever we first reviewed it. So looking forward to giving it the proper deep dive that it deserves next week. But until then, I'm Liam.
And I'm Cal.
And we'll talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU review.
Arrivederci.